We have to understand kind of the history behind why we want to do what we want to do, and then push that forward into our practice time so it can direct our practice times. What is up? Welcome back to the Drum Show podcast, and I want to talk about in this episode something that with my students can become one of their biggest hurdles to get over. It's why I think this podcast is so important, because all the lessons we learn aren't necessarily here on the drum. So many of the lessons I've learned conversing with other teachers or students or professionals, and not necessarily on the drums. And this has to do with something that can be a major hindrance to your progress, to how you feel about your playing. But it's also something that we all too often ignore. We just kind of forget about it. And I know for many of my students, whenever they are lacking motivation, whenever they're lacking, whenever they're not feeling good about their playing, whenever they're not feeling like they're making any progress, and we can go on down the line, I can a lot of times bring it back to this one thing, because this has got to be our anchor in our playing, and it has to be our anchor whenever we are trying to get better at this instrument. Otherwise, there's no point to it. We don't have a reason to do it unless we define this one thing. And that can take just a little bit of thinking. For some of you, you'll be able to instantly go, you know what, this is what it is. And I would challenge some of you, even if you think that's it, take some time to think about it so that you can understand, because this is going to be one of the foundational building blocks of why you do what you do. And that is, why do you play the drums? Why are you wanting to start playing the drums? Why did you start playing the drums? What is the point? What's your why in all of this? And that's different for different people. The why is neither good nor bad. It just is. My why to play may be different than your why to play. Let me give you a couple of these that may help this make sense. Students that I've dealt with in the past, that I'm dealing with currently. I run an online drum school at stevensdrumshed.com. It's been open now for over 13 years, put thousands of students through the program. We have thousands in the program right now. I'd love to have you be a part of that. You can find the link in the video description, or you can find it in the podcast description, whether you're watching this on a YouTube podcast or you're just listening on Spotify or Apple or wherever. You can find that down there. I'd love to have you be a part of it. As well, I do drum camps every year. We got 6 of them this year. Level 1s, level 2, level 3s. There are still some spots available for those too. You can find that information as well in all the descriptions if you want to check that out. But this is one of the things that I'm constantly talking about in live calls, in-person meetings, at the camps. We have to remember our why. And whenever they're lacking motivation and feeling, I'll go back to like, hey, what's your why? Why are you playing the drums? Now, let me give you some instances that I've had that will help you understand why this is important, okay? First off, I have a student come in, and I've had both of these, doctors, multiple doctors. Surgeon was one of them. Lawyers were a couple of them. They have these very high-pressure jobs, right? Like everything hangs on them doing their job well. People lose tons of money or they gain tons of money. Wrongs are righted. Wrongs are not righted. Surgeries go right, surgeries go wrong. People live, people die according to their jobs. That's a high pressure environment. Many times, even though they're high achievers, they are wanting something that helps them decompress. Something that is not as pressure-filled as that. Something that when they get home, they're able to do because they enjoy it. The problem a lot of times with those type of individuals and professionals is that they're so driven, they have a hard time separating that from even their hobbies. So that's sometimes something I have to address when like, hey, hold up. This isn't surgery. This isn't rocket surgery, right? I know it's an abbreviation. It's supposed to be. This isn't rocket science. This isn't, surgery. We're not saving lives here. We're playing the drums. And so we have to keep it in its space for that person. And whenever the lessons get too pressure filled, whenever they start hitting too many points of failures, if we spend all our time on technique and we're not working on songs, if we're getting away from the music that they love, they kind of become disenchanted. for me, whenever I became a music major in college, I had to do the courses that they put before me. It really didn't matter how I felt about them. I had to do it to graduate, right? That's different than this individual's experience with the drums. Let's take another individual's experience. I had a one-on-one call with a student, and they were just really bummed down. They weren't motivated, which was different for them because they always have been motivated. They weren't seeing progress. They just kind of were disenchanted with the whole thing. Maybe I'll quit drumming. And anytime I get something like that from a person, I'm like, well, hold on. What before you quit, and it's totally fine if you quit, no problem, or change to another instrument or whatever. It's not going to hurt anybody. That's okay. You can do that. But before we do that, let's just make sure that's what you want to do. And so I was digging into it with him. And he said, you know what? I mean, I really just want to play in my buddy's country band. And I feel like working on these shuffles and jazz is not helping that. And I said, oh, okay, hold up. Rewind. Repeat what you just said. And I had him repeat that back to me. I said, okay, so why are we working on jazz and shuffles if this is your purpose? Why have we well, I've just heard that that's something I need to be working on. I said, okay, hold up. All right, let's push pause on everything. Yes, it's good to work on jazz playing. It's good to work on the blues, right? But what I found the best thing to do with students is to keep them in their lane that they're very interested and passionate about, and then learn how the blues intersects with that, because it does. It intersects with country. Learn how jazz intersected with country at a certain time in history. These music is intertwined, and we have times in history where they're overlapping. We have things we can learn in jazz that can apply to country music. We have jazz players that became country players. We have country players that became jazz players. Vice versa, blues players that became both, right? So it's my job as the teacher to help them understand how that intersects. But what my job as a teacher is to squash that person's reason for playing. I have to be aware. If you're a teacher and you're teaching the drums, you have to be aware of why that drummer is playing the drums. I'm sorry. Look, if they want to be a country drummer in a band, working on rudiments all the time is probably not going to get them where they want to go. And that flies in the face of what a lot of people say. Oh, we're drummers. We got to look. No, not everyone wants to learn blush, or that's well, I guess that was not an official rudiment. Not everybody wants to learn a flam tap. Not everybody wants to learn a drag, a drag a diddle, double paradiddle. Not everybody wants to learn those. Some people want to learn Back in Black. They want to learn the Immigrant Song. That's their rudiment, right? So me as a teacher, it's up to me to understand what is their truth in learning the instrument, because you see, when we start learning the drums, we're seeking an identity change, and we don't really recognize that. There's a great a book called, I think it's called Atomic Habits, and that's what we talk about. Whenever we start something new, we're wanting to see an identity change. You are wanting to identify as a drummer. To do that, we have to do things that drummers do, and drummers typically interact with the drums on a regular basis, right? So back to the student, I said, look, if you're wanting to play in a country band, why don't we get you a set of lessons that works on material that's applicable immediately to that place? And why don't we start setting up some jam sessions with your buddy and his country band? Why don't we start learning some songs that are in that vein? He's like, oh man, that would be awesome. I said, great. I mean, like that. How do we do that? We got back to the truth. Why are you playing the drums? And some of us have never thought about it, right? You know what I hear so much from people? I've heard this from, I've heard this from a lot of ladies that want to become drummers, women that want to become drummers. I wanted to play the drums when I was a kid, but my band director said the girls didn't play the drums, and they handed me a flute, they handed me a clarinet, and that's what I did. And I quit after a year because I didn't really like doing that. I've always wanted to play the drums, but I haven't felt like it's very girly. Or maybe their parents were the ones that did that. That's a big one too. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's get over that, because it's by far not, there are more males in drumming, but there are tons of females. Like this is not a gender-specific instrument, right? So it's walking through that with them. That was a love that they always wanted to do that they didn't get to do. It's up to me as the teacher to recognize that and go, hey, there's something missing here. They were told this was not for them, but they felt like it was for them. So let's get that back, right? So we have to understand kind of the history behind why we want to do what we want to do, and then push that forward into our practice times, so it can direct our practice times. I have a lot of drummers that, I always wanted to play drums when I was a kid. It was too loud, though. My parents couldn't afford the instrument because it was a little bit more expensive. I got in college. I was living in dorms. I couldn't play then. And then I got married, started having kids. I just kind of always pushed my thing to the back. And now my kids are grown. They're in college. I have more time, have a little bit more money. I've been working longer. And I want to do this for me. I've heard this from a lot of people as their reason. I want to do something for me. I've kind of given, the last 30 years of my life to kids and family, and now I just want to take some time each day and do something that I want to do. They're not bitter about all that. They just kind of have put that on the back burner, right? So that's a valid reason. The reason is you want to do something you want to do for yourself. This is you time every day. This is kind of how you center yourself. I've had students that were going through some pretty trying times in their life, and they, honest to God, considered drumming as an anchor in their life. So it was up to me as the teacher to help them recognize that, and then it was up to us to go, okay, how do we develop your practice time, develop your curriculum and your material so that you're working on the things that a typical drummer needs to work on, but also so that it's in the lane that you feel like it's kind of nourishing that place in your soul. And a lot of you are like, okay, nourishing your soul. Seriously, for some people, this is a stress reliever, and that's how they want to keep it in their life. This podcast is brought to you by the Drum Better Daily program. That's actually my online drum school that I've run now for 12 plus years. Not only have I been playing the drums professionally since the age of 15, I've been teaching since the age of 18. Matter of fact, I talked to one of my first student a few days ago. I actually called him to see if he could sub a gig out for me. Daniel, love you, man. And he's still playing. He's still doing it on a pro level. I would love to have you go check it out at stevensdrumshed.com. You can find a link to that in the show notes or video description, whichever platform you're watching it on. But it truly is a community of like-minded drummers where we are striving to just be the best that we can be at the drums. In addition to over 70 pre-recorded drum courses, there's also a tech talk area where we talk about everything technology related as it pertains to the drums, e-kits, recording, doing videos, all of that stuff. There are forums where you can hang out with the other students as well. We do 2 live video student calls every week that you can join if you'd like to. We do guest artist calls monthly, and I'll even make you a personalized lesson plan if that's what you need. Yes, we talk about the nuts and bolts of drumming. Yes, I give you exercises, but we also talk a lot about how to practice more efficiently, how to practice better, and how to get more out of your practice time. I know you're just like me. You're busy, you're being pulled by work, by family, by friends, by other responsibilities. Whenever you practice, you really want to see gains and have it be productive. That is what we focus on in the Drum Better Daily program. I'll have to say personally, it's been really cool because some of these students I've worked with for over 12 years, we started running drum camps last year in 2022, and I got to meet some of them in person for the first time. Those drum camps have been selling out. They've been just blowing my mind with how much fun they are and how great a time it is to bring the community together in person. A community that was started online and has been going online strong now for over 12 years. I'd love to have you be a part of it. So you may be asking, okay, well, Steven, that's great. Why do you play the drums? It's a good question. My parents were both musicians, not professionally. My dad was a pastor. My mom was the minister of music at our church. And I would go to sleep every Saturday night listening to her pluck through on the piano the songs for the next morning and sing them. We would actually beg her to do that. So there was a very fond place in my heart for music. That's something I remember fondly. I remember my dad singing. He could sing. He could play a little bit of piano. And so I grew up with music around me. Tried the piano. Didn't have a great teacher. And for whatever reason, I got in school band and I said, well, I want to play the drums. I don't remember why I said I wanted to play the drums, but I wanted to play the drums. And then it was snare drum, right? I wanted to play the saxophone, but I tested badly on the saxophone, which I'm actually glad because I don't think I would have enjoyed playing the saxophone long term. But I wound up playing the drums. I really liked it. And then I said, well, I like playing the drums, but I really don't like marching band. I think I'd like a drum set. I think that would be kind of cool. So got a drum set. A couple weeks after that, the drummer for our church left. And then it was, we need a drummer for the church, need you to play. So literally a couple weeks after I had my drum kit, I was playing in front of people 3 times a week with 3 rehearsals attached to it with these individuals that had been playing way longer than me. So going back, I don't really remember my purpose for playing the drums at that time, besides it was something I was interested in. And that's an okay place to start. After that, I got so deeply involved so very quickly with a musical community. The piano player, the worship leader at that church is like, he's a second father to me. He's a huge musical mentor. I wound up living with he and his wife for a little while after I graduated high school, and I'm now back playing with him on a semi-regular basis here for some out-of-town gigs, which is very exciting for me. I'm very happy to be back in an environment with him. I had a bass player who turned out to be one of my best friends. I had a acoustic guitar player who he wound up being the person that I cut my first album with, his album. We are very good friends. Now his son is learning the drums. So all of a sudden I was embedded into this musical community. And now my purpose for playing the drums was much greater because I had been exposed to music and how we could play music, how it affected people, and that's what I wanted to do. Music is my goal with the drums. I consider myself a musician. Drums are the way that I get to interact with other musicians and play music. If tomorrow I woke up and the drums were gone, or I didn't have the ability to play the drums, let's say tomorrow I woke up and God forbid, I got in a car accident and I'm paralyzed from the waist down, I would immediately pick up another instrument that didn't require my feet. Guitar would come to mind, bass would come to mind. Why? Because at my core, I am a musician, and musicians interact with other musicians by playing music, and that's what I want to do. This moment in time, the drums are how I do that, and I love them for that. And so if I know that that's my core truth, then I branch out from there. Now, how does that affect everything else I do? I have found, because you have some teachers that are like, I'm not a player, I'm a teacher, that's my purpose in life. Look, I think my purpose in life is also to teach. I think we can have a couple purposes. I don't think we need to define our life so narrowly. I plan to live to 80, 90, 100. I know that's those big goals, but that's like my wife and I talk about that all the time. We want to live to 100. That's like a goal of ours. I don't know. It's a generic number. If I don't hit it, so what? But I'm going there. I'm going for it. So we talk about what we eat and how we're structuring our day and the stress we have, all those things. And so knowing that teaching is a purpose of mine, but what is the purpose of teaching? If I get into teaching the drums, then I have to go, well, what's my reason for doing this? If I only teach and I do not play music regularly with other musicians, I have found in my own life, my teaching suffers. I don't really have a purpose to play. I'm like, what's the point? I prefer to have gigs on the regular. I prefer to be interacting with other musicians. It helps my playing, it helps my teaching, and it helps my students. And so part of my drumming now, because I've become a teacher, is I need to keep being a musician that interacts with other musicians on the drums, because I also teach the drums. And for that teaching kind of dries up when I get away from my purpose. Do you see how the teaching draws back to my main purpose? Because if I unplug playing music regularly with other musicians, I don't know. I'd rather just go do a desk job. You know what I'm saying? It kind of loses its appeal to me. But all these decisions are driven back through what's my purpose. And you're like, Stephen, this is just a hobby. Why are we getting so intense about it? Because even hobbies, we have to understand why. Why do you want to do that? And it's okay if you say, I want to do it just because I want to do it. I think it looks fun. Bingo. Okay. Are you having fun doing this? Well, no, I'm kind of miserable because I'm not working on anything that I like. Okay, well, let's fix that. As a teacher, I should be able to pull that into the realm of, does that mean we're going to always do things we like? No. But if I can show them the purpose of hand technique in this song that they want to play, they go, oh, wow, so I need to work on hand technique. That's right, you need to work on hand technique. And that is how you lead a horse to water. You let them get thirsty. And then they're like, oh, I need to go over there to get water. Yeah, you do. So then they're very enthused to work on hand technique because then they see themselves hitting their goal of playing that song. With There was a surgeon that I had that I taught, and they were just very unenthused. They said, I feel like it's just another job when I come home to drum. And I said, well, hold on. Why do we feel like that? Well, I mean, what we went back to is they're such a high achiever. They'd worked so hard for so long that they were applying all of that to drumming, and that's good, but that can make it miserable too. And I said, okay, cool. What would be fun to you? Man, if I could just learn some songs that I liked. Got it. So what we did was we made them a lesson plan. For the next month, I want you to come in, and here's the list of songs that you said you liked. They're on your level. Learn these songs. So they started doing that. Every day's practice was about learning the songs. And you know what? Things turned around. They started being enthused. They started looking forward to getting off work, going home, interacting with the family, and then having some time to themselves that they could decompress, play the drums to music that they loved. This is a good thing. You have to understand this is a good thing. So if you're finding yourself discouraged in your practice time, you're finding yourself, I don't know what I'm supposed to work on. I don't know. This is one of the first keys whenever people say, I don't know what I'm supposed to work on. Or I find them jumping from thing to thing. I'm like, hold up. Whoa. What are we doing here? Well, I just feel like I'm behind. Behind what? I just feel like I'm not learning as fast as I need to. Okay. And we kind of backtrack and go back to the purpose of like, okay, first of all, this music's not a race. Races are for horses. We're not horses, or I don't think you are. And what we have to do is reestablish that purpose and then look forward from there to generate lesson material that is applicable for where they are, that will get them towards their goals, also make them become a better drummer. There are 1,000,001 ways to become a great drummer. I can give you 1,000 drummers, lay them out before you, and every one of their paths look different. Not one of them went through the same thing. They all go through different. I meet professionals every day. They're like, no, all I did was play the music. I'd come home and I just played the music. I loved it. Cool. That sounds pretty cool. And so we just have to understand it's neither good nor bad what our purpose is for playing this instrument. What is bad is if we don't define that purpose, because then we become, what I guess Zig Ziglar would call a wandering generality instead of a meaningful specific. That's what we want to be. We want to be specific with what we want to do. So right now in my practice time really has to be attached to some goals that I'm achieving. Right now in my practice time, I'm a professional drummer. Whenever you become a professional musician, there are skills, a professional in any field, there are skills you need to keep, up to par so that you can pull them out when you need them. There's a warm-up I used to go through. So I'm relearning that warm-up because I feel that warm-up brushes up on a lot of my skills. That's part of my practice session. Second part of my practice session is I am working on fleshing through the material for a book I'm writing. So that is, I'm practicing the material for the book. Even though I'm writing it, some of it I cannot play. There are ideas I think this would be, so I need to go through it, make sure it is, see how it sounds, see what it sounds like when I get it up to tempo. And then there are a couple of musical projects I'm working on. So that's the other part of my practice time. All of these are attached to things that are very important to me. I'm also a creative. I consider myself a creative, and we can create in a lot of different ways. Music is one of the ways that I create. Writing drum books and drum lessons is another way that I create. Creating drum videos is another way. Creating podcasts is another way that I create. We can create in all different ways and all different forms, but I consider myself a creative at my core and an artist at my core. And so you'll see that a lot of my practice time is attached to things I want to create now. It wasn't always that way. There were skills I needed to attain to be able to create the things I want to create. So there's a long time that was the reason that I would come in and practice, and I had curriculum and all that stuff. And so I really think if you're unmotivated in your practice time, if you find yourself lacking vision or purpose, or you're just like, man, I used to love playing drums, now I hate it, before you quit, just take a second and go, well, what's my purpose for playing the drums? Have I defined a purpose? And if you haven't, please take the time to define your purpose. Take the time to understand why you're playing the drums, and I promise you, this will reap huge benefits in your practice time.